The San Francisco Shock has had a lot of players who some consider the best of all time in their respective role, but Rascal never seems to be in the category of being praised to the same degree. There's only certain corners that really appreciate him, while others pay more attention to everyone else. I wanted to talk a little bit about Rascal today, seeming to be one of the most underrated players of all time. The only 3-time champion deserves it. What's even more crazy than him being a 3-time champion is that Rascal could have been a 4-time champion. When he started his career back in 2018, he was a part of the London Spitfire roster. Back when Overwatch had money, or dumb enough to be spending as much as they did, Cloud9 had the brilliant idea of signing 2 of the best performing Apex teams, GC Busan and Kangdu Panthera, to create a 12-man roster. I get everything was new back then. It just doesn't make sense to me why you'd even need that. Taking the best pieces from both would make the most sense, but none of that matters apparently. London Spitfire was a great team, even winning the first ever stage. Rascal played here and there. It was strange considering the supposed talent he possessed. I guess it was sort of an embarrassment of riches for the time. Pieces were always getting swapped out constantly for no rhyme or reason. So after stage 1 was done and over with, Rascal either got dropped or decided to leave. Nothing with validity came out publicly saying what happened here. Dallas Fuel was his next team, which was a sizable downgrade from the team he just won a stage with. You're going from a team with Profit and Birdring on it to a group of bums and Effect. It was a very short stint, only being 1 stage again. Rascal joining this team was kind of a bizarre choice unless you truly understand what you're walking into. Willingly joining an awful team is a daunting decision that boggles my mind. My guess is money. You're not going to win a stage. You're barely even winning matches, honestly. Dallas went 2-8 in stage 2, a slight improvement over stage 1, with them going 1-9. Rascal was either dropped or wanted to leave again after stage 2 concluded. I'm leaning more towards dropped this time since Wins made a tweet about Rascal saying, "Rascal sure manipulated the crowd well, still being seen as this flawless little angel who only wanted the team to work harder. Evidence is out there. He got cut from 2 different teams despite his talent. He is toxic and impossible to work with." Rascal never made a response to this, nor could I find this claimed evidence. It's only one side of the story. Dallas could have dropped him because of internal conflict between the players. No one knows. Okay, so after I finished this video and put it all together, I actually did find a response that Rascal had to this, essentially saying that the team was claiming he was forcing the Korean hard work ethic onto them and they didn't want to do it. They were trying to rest and do whatever else, but he was being very mean and disrespectful to them, supposedly. I put the message on screen. It is translated, so the English isn't the greatest. This whole situation could be bullshit. I have no idea. Let's move on. This ended Rascal's career for 2018, not a very good one up to this point. He could be seen as a player that never got a chance or a mean evil man, depending on if you are one of the weird people who's a fan of a team that can't win a match or not. Regardless of your stance, I think it was safe to say Rascal would be coming back to some capacity. There were some highlights from him, obviously not reaching his peak yet, with plenty of potential to go higher. NRG was the team who wanted to take this gamble, picking him up for their contenders team, then ultimately promoting him to Shock for 2019. But the only problem was that he was a DPS player, and sadly 2019 was very discriminating towards those people and didn't want them to exist for most of that season. Shock started unknowing who to put where, trying out Architect on Brig or Ana since that's what DPS players would do during GOATs. Then they eventually settled on Rascal for that position, playing mostly Brig. I don't really know what to say about this. Saying someone's Brig is amazing during this time period is like congratulating yourself for breathing. It was wonderful, cool. Talking about Brig really opens up some trauma boxes that most people don't want to relive if they enjoy fun. Thankfully, this is not the interesting part for Rascal in 2019. It was more so how Shock utilized Rascal and Baptiste within GOATs, not being very common amongst teams. Sometimes new heroes in Overwatch League were not played during the earlier seasons. If you look at 2018, Brig was looked at as this weird niche hero during release and only certain teams played it. And we're talking about release Brig, the most broken hero release in the history of this game. I'm sure after everyone watching this video is dust and bones, people will still be asking this question of how no one in the first season of Overwatch League understood how powerful Brig was. This is clearly absurd, and now I don't think that would be the case. This player base and coaches are smart enough to understand how impactful a hero you almost cannot win a 1v1 against would be. So a player taking the reins of finding ways to utilize a brand new hero was not very common. Baptiste, of course, fell under this same umbrella. How you were supposed to play this character in GOATS was not really understood. He released before Sigma, so double shield wasn't a thing yet, and I'm not sure how well double shield would have gone into GOATS anyways. Plus, they couldn't play it because roll-lock wasn't a thing yet. But Rascal was one of the few people who attempted finding a way to utilize the Baptiste. They replaced Brig and put the BAP in. I'm not going to delve into how this comp is played, rather using this as an example to what Rascal seemed to be quite good at throughout parts of his career. If you're curious, Spilo did have a breakdown of how this comp was executed and the way everything works. Before the days of remove the glass and why coming before ranked is good, he broke this down quite nicely. Shock did find some success with BAP GOATS. This was an off strategy where teams actually struggled against it. The origin of it is unknown. I'm assuming Shock created it. They played this mostly on 2CP or anywhere Immortality Field could get maximum value. Across both Brig and Baptiste, Rascal had his place on the Shock roster, looking great at both. He was daring to play this new comp with the BAP, take the reins of utilizing the new hero when most others didn't. Of course, he was still overlooked by everyone else. Even when DPS was actually played in Stage 4, this sentiment didn't really change. Watching these matches back, Rascal looked insane at Mei and Pharah, but whenever anyone talks about a DPS player performing on the Shock, it's either Sinatra or Architect, never Rascal. At least his performances were still a positive sign for the future, a crumb of what's to come in 2020. Thankfully, in this season, DPS heroes would be played full-time again, and the peak of Rascal's career came. Initially, Shock was struggling who to put where, just like 2019, rotating Architect, Striker, and Ons for hitscan, having Rascal come in for a few maps, then swap him out to put someone else on the same hero, a classic crusty moment of I don't know what to do with my players, eventually finding the correct positions. Striker was the Tracer, Reaper, and Hanzo primarily, Ons played hitscan, sometimes flexing to other heroes, then Rascal filled the gaps in, on Pharah, Mei, or whoever else was needed. Architect was sent to the Hangzhou Spark shortly into the 2020 season, presumably not being able to find a spot for him to fit into the roster after getting all the other pieces situated. Supposedly, the choice was between Rascal and Architect for who was going to get cut. Thankfully, for Rascal's case, it was Architect who suffered that fate. We finally get to see Rascal's DPS talents in full effect, 2 years in the making, yet again picking up another new hero to a better ability than most. Echo. It was not as unique as Baptiste GOATS, but Rascal was pretty good at Echo, where once again, it gets overlooked and completely forgotten about. Fleta is the person who gets praised the most for his Echo performances in 2020, rightfully so. The way he and Shanghai Dragons played around it was stupendous, but Rascal was close, if not matching Fleta at points. All throughout Mei Melee, Rascal was on Echo with an assortment of other heroes, looking amazing at all of them, much better than you'd expect for someone who hasn't really played his role since 2018. Even still, it was only 2 stages there. Mei was a great hero for him, whether Shock wanted to play a Rhine comp, double shield with Mei, Rascal always looked to be one of the best. Personally, I still think Ivy on Fusion was the best Mei from 2020, but that's not to say Rascal was far behind. It's a very small gap. Unfortunately, after Mei Melee, which Shock won quite easily, Ashe Tracer is what a lot of teams started leaning more towards, having Striker Ons on your team. Obviously, Rascal is not going to play over either of them on those heroes, only coming in to play Mei or some other niche hero, so it was unfortunate to see his playtime go down after his amazing performances in the first stage. Until Genji became meta, where we expected to see Rascal play a lot again, but he just didn't. Summer Showdown was the random buff to Genji we get to see once every 3 years, and based upon previous performances on everything, Rascal being great at Genji is a safe assumption, plus he showed plenty of highlights in 2018. Shock was very reluctant to play Genji for some reason, sticking with their Ashe or Widow Tracer. I'm guessing Krusty didn't have faith in Rascal playing it, or maybe they felt really confident in playing Ashe Tracer regardless of meta, since you have Striker and Ons to work with. They almost made finals playing playing it, so maybe Krusty was right there. Sadly, Sparkle was just too good for them to beat, and he tore this team to shreds. Like, no joke, after watching this match was literally just Sparkle being the best player on his team for every map. Rascal did play on one map, to be fair, but it makes no sense. They didn't play him at all on this hero beforehand, so just why? You've been committed to the Ash Tracer for so long, why change it on one random map? But Countdown Cup is where it got really strange. Genji was still being played. Shock picked up Tayo for Genji, I guess. He's not Who Are You, but whatever. He comes in, plays 2 matches, and then never plays again. Afterwards, Rascal played Genji, but only for 3 maps. 2 against Dallas Fuel and the other against Florida. Super was on Genji more than Rascal was. This is one of the biggest memes in Overwatch League history. Apparently, this was a genuine strategy. It's just hard to believe that when Shock was going against a limp dick team like Boston Uprising or Vancouver Titans with it. But as we got to the stage finals, Fusion versus Shock, Rascal comes in to save the day playing Genji, looking better than anyone else has, being the best performing player in the entire lobby, just carrying some of these maps. Like, where was this Rascal the whole time? This really wasn't playing during the Summer Showdown? The performances here clearly showed how talented Rascal was. He's a top tier Echo who was a progenitor for the hero, arguably the best Mei in the league, now laying down the Genji play, dominating the Fusion. I'm genuinely surprised he did not get player of the match here. Apparently the people who make that decision decided to forget about him too and give it to Twilight, but he was a real difference maker here for Shock winning this. Throughout this whole series, the only maps that Shock lost were maps Rascal didn't play. So again, my question is, why did he not play during Summer Showdown? Or why sign a Genji player when you never play him? I thought that's what Tayo was for. Like, where is he? I guess there are just some situations no one will truly understand. Krusty's mind is not like everyone else's. How he can look like the greatest brain to ever look at the game while also looking like he's a lost boy who can't find his parents at the same time is truly impeccable. Most importantly, after this Countdown Cup finals match, we got the best possible send-off that wraps up Rascal's career perfectly.
I cannot believe it! I cannot fucking believe it! I simply refuse to believe the absolute incompetent negligence of actually not, for any of these categories whatsoever, not voting for fucking Rascal. This guy doesn't get props by anyone on no one's social media radar whatsoever. Everyone's talking about like, oh, Smurf, you know, Smurfies, poor Smurf. Think about Rascal. He literally came into the league at the start of the year, was the best Mei. He revolutionized the way you play Echo and set the guidelines for everyone else in the league for months, or pretty much like half the season. And then he comes into the Countdown Cup and plays the Genji that actually turns the San Francisco Shock around, and they win the series against the Philadelphia Fusion. How is no one on this planet talking about Rascal as one of the most underrated players of the year? It's absolutely hurting my soul.
As funny as this clip is, it actually encapsulates Rascal's career. Is Rascal the best player Overwatch has ever seen? No. His teammates on both champion rosters he was a part of would be considered better than him, but the fact he never gets any praise or completely overlooked when he was a fantastic player, picking up new heroes when other people wouldn't or couldn't, filling in the gaps of his other DPS on Pharah, Genji, Mei, even Brig post Rollock exceptionally well, being an important piece to Shock winning 2 stages in 2020. Strangely, people talk more about Architect having a bad time and sadly being transitioned to Hangzhou more than Rascal. Maybe Rascal having these really large gaps between playtime or also barely playing his role might have something to do with it. On Shock, Rascal played Brig or BAP way more than DPS, which of course isn't entirely his fault. Goats happened. And I guess playing behind Ons and Striker put Rascal's talent in the shadows. Is there a single player who gets as underrated or forgotten about as Rascal? He's always been an exceptionally talented player that doesn't get any appreciation. Some people even forget he played for Fusion in 2021. I'm not saying he was good, they were having some visa issues, so a few players needed to get signed really quick, where Rascal, Toby, and Hotba were signed. His performances were kinda washed at that point, possibly losing passion for playing. After winning 2 rings, that can happen to you. Then after this, he went into coaching where he joined Dallas Fuel, got his 3rd ring, only person to ever do it. Not even the bum Violet could do that. If Atlanta Reign won in 2023, he could have had a 4th ring. I mean, how many people forget he was coaching Atlanta after Wizard Young left? The guy is an actual ghost. For someone being a large part of 2 championships, or 3 depending on how much you value coaching, winning so many stages, he gets forgotten or underrated a lot. There was genuine talent here, and I wish he got to play more of 2018 and even 2020. So, what are your thoughts on Rascal? Am I just crazy for thinking he's this underrated? Make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Also, check out my playlist on a bunch of other Overwatch pro players. There should be one in there that interests you, hopefully.